GS 4 Mains 2026 paper analysis. In this paper, what we are going to discuss, those are 6 sections. That is, first one is what this paper tells you, and second one is what changed 2013 to 2025 against 2026, and every question and how to write it, and what our material taught, and what matched, and what UPSC is thinking, and how to prepare for 2027. So we are going to discuss the section number 1, that is what this paper tells you, what the paper actually tested. On August 23rd, Sunday afternoon, 3 hours, 250 marks, the last paper of the mains GS. Start with what this paper did not ask you. What did not ask you? It did not ask you to explain emotional intelligence. It did not ask what a code of conduct is. It did not ask you to define integrity. In 13 section A parts and 6 case studies, there is not one definitional question anywhere. Anywhere. Then what 2026 tested? 2026 tested conflicts, not definitions. What it did instead, 19 times over, was named two legitimate claims and asked you to hold them apart. That is what accountability against convenience, development against habitat, research benefit against consent, security against rights, paternalism against autonomy, enforcement against a child's right to school, empathy against compliance, fiscal probity against Article 21, national interest against ethics. Named collisions, it tested this only. That list is not a summary of the paper, it is the actual paper. And I'm not asking you to take that as my reading. Here is the proof, and it is a word count. So, what is the balance here? 5 times in one paper. The word balance appears 5 times as the explicit demand. Security with human rights, efficiency with effectiveness, enforcement with educational rights, physical probity with empathy, strategic interest with ethical considerations. Across the 13 years of Section A before this, that demand appears once in 2015 paper. One occurrence in 13 years, 5 in one paper. 5 in one paper. And what is the Section A? 13 parts into 10 marks each one, that is 130 marks. And Section B, that is 6 cases, each case carried 20 marks, that is 120 marks. The architecture did not move, the shape did not move. 13 into 10 marks, 13 parts, and question 3 carrying 3 of them, 6 cases at 20 marks, fifth consecutive paper with that shape. Fifth consecutive paper with that shape. And the number that decides your score, Section B is 120 of 250 marks, 48%. Printed second and written last by somebody who has already been in that hall for 2 hours and wrote GS3 the same morning. roughly 90 marks, about 36%. Roughly 90 marks, about 36% touched either technology and automation ethics or medical and consent ethics. 36%. Look at that. Roughly 90 marks, about 36% touched either technology and automation ethics or medical and consent ethics. 50 marks of technology across three questions, 40 of medical and consent across from three more. So two domains, more than a third of the paper. Actually, what changed? Every GS paper we looked from 2013 to 25 against this 2026 paper. What are the changes we identify? That is four countable changes. Four countable changes. Now put this paper against every GS paper, fourth paper, GS4 ethics paper since 2013. Five changes, all countable. The definition, they stopped the definition, the dilemma, the bare quotation. The first one is the definitional question is extinct. The definitional question is extinct. For for 13 years, section A opened with the words, what do you understand by values and ethics, probity twice, accountability, crisis of conscience twice, public interest, constitutional morality, moral integrity, and professional efficiency as recently as 2023. This year, not one. And the paper goes further where a concept is needed. The stem now supplies the definition itself. Question 4, part B. Hands you both halves. Hands you both halves. Hands you both halves of the efficiency, effectiveness pair and asks only for the trade-off. Then compared to 2023, which asked what you understand by moral integrity and professional efficiency, same territory. The marks have moved off the definition and onto the preparation. Then second one, it stopped asking you to name the dilemma. The second one, what? It stopped asking you to name the dilemma. What are the ethical dilemmas being faced by X? Was a standing sub question 2021, 5 of 6 cases in 2022, 2024, and 2025. This year, nowhere. The standing sub question, like what are the ethical dilemmas being faced by X? X means whether Vijay or Ajit or anyone. It's a constant. Because the paper now states the dilemma inside the stem. Question 10 names both hands itself. Look at the question 10 and look at the question number 11. Question 11 names the causality. Causality, what? Functional neutrality. So the paragraph, most candidates open a case with the ethical issues involved in the case are is worth almost nothing now. You are paid for the resolution, not the restatement. So the paragraph, most candidates open a case with the ethical issues involved in this case are is worth almost nothing now. You are paid for the resolution, not the restatement. And critically examine and critically evaluate the work horse webs of 2021 and 2022 appear 0 times. Also gone. Critically examine and critically evaluate workhorse verbs. And what is the bare quotation? The bare quotation died in a single year. The third one is what? The bare quotation died in a single year. For 13 years, the dominant thinker format was a quotation with no question attached at all, just a line. The attribution, 150 words. Gandhi and Aristotle in 2013, let's say. Socrates in 2019. The Dalai Lama in 2021. Immanuel Kant in 2024. 25 of them in 2024. All three parts of the thinker block were bare. This year, zero. All three parts carry a directed question, and two of the three aim it at administration. So the slot held, that is fifth consecutive paper, same position, 30 marks. The format inverted. So the quotation, the bare quotation died in a single year. Then parts opening with a quoted statement. Quotation density fell by roughly a third in 1 year. Only one part of this paper carries an actual quoted line, and the section number 4, that is section A, absorbed the case study. This is the most important phenomena in 2026 paper. Section A absorbed the case study. 5 of the 13 parts are not theory questions. They are compressed cases with a named actor and a fact pattern. The professor and the AI report, that is artificial intelligence report, the district officer and the forest community, the DM and the tribe, the doctor and the reluctant patient, the DM and his PS daughter. So 50 marks of section A written as miniature cases. This is the important phenomena. Mini case studies like miniature cases. The stems got longer with it. Question 3 part A, question 3 part A, and question 4 part A run to about 45 words each. A bare quotation used to run to 12, which costs you reading time inside section A and makes the section B squeeze worse. Subparts per case 2022 4.3, subparts for 20 case 2023 2.5, comes to 2024 3.3, and 2025 3.3, and 2026 2.0 every case. So look at this 2022 subparts as far as section B is concerned. That is what 4.3 2022, 2023 2.5, 2024 3.3, 3 and 3.3, 2025 3.3, and comes to 2026 two subparts only. Two subparts only. So the fifth one is, and this is most usable number in this film, section B halved its subparts. In 2022, the average was 4.3. I again repeating, in 2024 and 2025 3.3. This year is exactly 2. Every case 12 subparts across 6 cases, no exceptions. The lowest in the corpus and the first time it has been uniform. In these many years from 2013 to 2025, what is the arithmetic here? So two parts, one part is each 125 words, so 250 words. The arithmetic 250 words across two subparts is about 125 words each. Ramesh's case in 2022 had five subparts, about 50 words each as part. 50 words is a list, 125 words is an argument. So 2022 gave you room only to enumerate, but comes to 2026, it gave you room to reason and expected it. So the bullet point case answer. So the bullet point case answer, 9 fragments under 4 headings, is now a scoring liability, not a safe format. So one more, every case is written in the third person. Lata and Dr. Mansi, Ravi, Seema, Vikas, Rajan, Ajit. Not one says you are the district magistrate. 5 of 6 were the third person in 2024, 5 of 6 in 2025, 6 of 6 now. So the words I would do not belong in a recommendation about Rajan, and what did not come through the corpus said it would. So zero marks on emotional intelligence, attitude, RTI, Citizens Charter, Code of Ethics, CSR, Corporate Governance, Whistleblower, Workplace Harassment, etc. Emotional intelligence and attitude, 19 question between 2013 and 2025. And this is the first paper in the corpus with nothing from that head at all. Did not come in this year 2026 paper regarding emotional intelligence head. No corporate case for the second year running. No whistleblower. The largest case archetype with 12 cases behind it. No workplace harassment. Absent 3 years now. So hold that list. It matters again in section number 5. So section number 3, every question on how to write it. Every question, 19 items in order. The trap, the move, and the line that scores. Every question, 13 parts into 10 marks each and 150 words. This is section A. 5 of 13 are compressed case studies, treat as those as cases, not theory. So now the part you came for, 19 items in order for each one, what it is actually asking, where the trap is, and the structure that scores. Section A, 13 parts into 10 marks. The first question, question number 1A, that is AI generated PhD evaluation. A professor short of time generates a doctoral evaluation with AI and submits with modification. So what is this? AI generated PhD evaluation, then accountability and integrity. A professor short of time generates a doctoral evaluation with artificial intelligence and submits it with modifications. The trap is here, writing a general essay on artificial intelligence like advantages, disadvantages, need for responsible AI. The paper has already given you the two lenses, that is accountability and integrity. And you must say inside them only accountability and integrity. Most important things in this particular case or section or question. So the real question is whether professional responsibility can be outsourced, and the answer is a distinction. Execution can be delegated. Judgment that the office exists to supply cannot. The university appointed him to evaluate. A tool that evaluates for him, he is replaced the thing. he was appointed for, not assisted it. So the real question here, you have to understand it, whether professional responsibility can be outsourced, and the answer is a distinction here. Execution can be delegated, judgment that the office exists to supply cannot. The university appointed him to evaluate. A tool that evaluates for him has replaced the thing he was appointed for, not assisted it. The structure, name what was actually delegated, then separate assistance from substitution, then the integrity of, like, the report carries his name and asserts his reading, which is a misrepresentation, whether or not the content is sound. Then the fix, disclosure of tool use, named authorship retained, verification of every claim against the thesis. So technology can, the line that scores what? Technology can automate execution. It cannot transfer moral responsibility, because it returns in question 8 and question 10 only. So what we have to say this, technology can automate execution. Technology automates execution, but it cannot transfer moral responsibility. Then question number 1b, business project displacing a forest community. So notice what is not in this question. There is no villain, nobody is corrupt, to the project is lawful, the community's claim is legitimate, and so is the development. So if you wrote this as greed against nature, you misread it, and most answers will. So it asks for the ethical challenge you will face as district officer. It asks for the ethical challenges you will face as the district officer. So the challenge must be yours, not the world's. So frame each as a collision. So development mandate against protection duty, you are the instrument of both. So consent, where the community has no real bargaining power. Compensation against restoration, because cash does not replace a livelihood system. So procedural fairness, when the hearing is a formality. Comes to irreversibility, housing can rebuild an old growth forest and an aquifer cannot. And the distribution question comes to this, the benefits go to the region, the cost to one community. So then comes to the closure, close on the safeguards you would insist upon rather than your own good intentions. The benefits here go to the region, the costs go to one community. This is the most important line, this is here. And then comes to the second question, that is question number 2a, untested mineral supplement for an endangered tribe. Almost every answer will weigh benefit against risk. Benefit against risk. So lives might be saved, the science is unproven. Balance. So that answer has already lost, because it accepted a premise the question planted. So test the premise first. A district magistrate cannot substitute for the research ethics and regulatory architecture. Ethics committee clearance and regulatory approval for a trial are not administrative powers. They are not his to exercise. So that does not leave him with nothing. Administrative facilitation is his only. Then protection of a vulnerable community very much is. Referring the proposal to the competent ethics body is his. Authorizing the science is not. So comes to the structure, draw the authority line. Then the ethics inside it. Vulnerability, meaningful consent where literacy and dependence are unequal. Community consent alongside individual non-malafeance with an untested compound. So then what he should actually do, facilitate an approved trial, ensure nutrition and existing care in the meantime, refuse to be approval. This is what untested supplement and endangered tribe. The trap is here what? So here university identifies possible remedy. Critical trials have not been conducted. So should the DM use it? So here you have to understand. The trap is what? Weighing benefit against risk. So the answer has already lost because it accepted premise the question quietly planted. So test the premise first. Then ethics committee clearance and trial approval are not administrative powers because that is technical. So then reason inside the line what? Vulnerability, meaningful consent, community consent, non-malafeance, maleficence, and untested compound. So facilitation is his, protection is his, authorizing the science is not. That is not administration power. So the second question number second B, part B, subpart B. Security balanced with human rights. Security balanced with human rights. 12 words of STEM, 10 marker question, the widest question on the paper. So you have to structure decides it. National security balanced with human rights. So refuse the trade-off framing in the first line. Then security exists to protect rights. Then rights are not an obstacle to security, but its purpose. An, an answer that treats them as a dial to be set has conceded the question. Then the test, and this is vocabulary that scores like legality, necessity, proportionality, least restrictive means, oversight, due process, and time limits with review. So any security measure that passes those is defensible. One that fails them is not, however, effective. So comes to one example briefly here. Preventive detention, preventive detention, surveillance, or an internet suspension. Then the limit. Emergencies are real and rights framework that cannot accommodate genuine emergency will simply be ignored. So say what the safeguard is instead of pretending the emergency away. So here what? Security exists to protect rights. Rights are not its obstacle. So they are its purpose. Then move to question number 3, subpart A. Ambedkar, civil disobedience and anarchy. An attributed warning, not a quotation. You must unpack it and with no quoted sentence to lean on. Not a quotation here, an attributed warning, and you must unpack it without a quoted sentence to lean on. What he claimed here, where constitutional remedies exist, abandoning them for extra constitutional methods is the grammar of anarchy. White holes. Constitutional methods are what make disagreement survivable. Each bypass licenses the next, and the strongest group wins. Now, the tension the question actually wants, laws can be unjust. Minorities can be structurally outvoted. Constitutional remedies can be slow enough to be useless. So, navigate rather than choose. Exhaust available remedies first. Non-violence, openness rather than concealment, willingness to accept the legal consequence, which is what separates civil disobedience from law breaking, proportionality to the injustice, and a duty running to other way to the state's response must itself be proportionate because disproportionate suppression manufactures the anarchy it claims to prevent. So, what is the limitation here? This is a high bar and it should be closed there. So, accepting legal consequence is what separates civil disobedience from law breaking. So, what is the trap here? Writing the constitutional morality answer, same speech, different line, and 2025 already took that one. So here what? Unpack the claim, then the tension, then say laws can be unjust, minorities structural outvoted, so remedies low enough to be useless, then navigate to exhaust remedies, non-violence, openness, proportionality, and proportionate state response, etc. Then we are moving to question number third B. Gandhi trusteeship in governance. How can an administrative officer apply trusteeship to ensure fairness and apply the concept question? Gandhi's trusteeship applied by an administrative officer and apply the concept question wearing a thinker's name. Do not spend your words on Gandhi's economics. So the core in one line. What is the core here? Wealth and power are held in trust for others, not owned. Read into public office. Authority is not a possession to be enjoyed or a reward collected. It is held on behalf of people who cannot supervise you. Then comes to application, then apply, and this is where the marks are. Discretion exercised for the beneficiary rather than the convenience of the office. Public funds as somebody else's money. Information as a public asset, not a bargaining chip. So postings and contracts decided as a trustee would not as an owner. Recusal where interest touches trust. The limitation here, limit and it must be there. What? Trusteeship is voluntary and unenforceable, which is why it needs accountability mechanisms bolted to it. A trustee nobody audits is what? A trustee nobody audits is just an owner with a better vocabulary. So a trustee is what? A trustee nobody audits is just an owner with better vocabulary. Then comes to Shakespeare, third C. Arms are fair when the intent is just. The only true quotation on the paper, four moves and they run whether or not you know the source. Comes to unpack, you have to unpack the legitimacy of coercive means derives from the purpose for which they are taken up. Then comes to justification, force is not self-justifying, so something outside it must license it, and that something is purpose. Then comes to application, one administrative situation where it decides something, police force in a riot, emergency powers, surveillance, each is legitimate for the stated purpose and legitimate the movement it serves another. So what matched quickly? The four moves carried question three part C, three part C, and whenever we never taught Shakespeare, he appears nowhere in 13 units. So the distinguished frame carried question 6 part B, and singer is named in unit 6 in a section headed what this unit deliberately does not teach. Trusteeship, the exact doctrine question 3 part to be asked for is in unit 6 with the administrative application attached. Aristotle's equity carried questions 5 110 and 5 precision pairs from the strategy film. 3 of them are papers own vocabulary. The strongest single match unit 8 already combined question number 10. So now the and the limit is what? And the limit which is the whole answer, just intent licenses taking up the means, it does not sanctify their use. Right intention is one criteria in the just war tradition, not the only one. Proportionality and discrimination still still bind, otherwise every excess is excluded by excused by the goodness of its aim. That limit is what turns an appreciation into an assessment, and it is where a 5 becomes an 8. Then moving to question number 4a, that is paternalism and beneficence. The doctor and the reluctant patient, the stem names both concepts, so define them through the case rather than before it. Beneficence is acting for the patient's good. Paternalism is overriding her own choice for her own good. The doctor's clinical view may be correct. That is beneficence. Rooting the persuasion through the family until she reluctantly agrees is paternalism, wearing consent as a costume. So the precise is wrong. The precise wrong. Consent obtained through pressure from those she depends on is not autonomous consent. Reluctant is the word in the stem and it is doing the work. Then the distinction that scores what? Soft paternalism, where capacity is impaired and intervention protects a choice she could not make, is defensible. Then hard paternalism, overriding a competent adult's settled decision, is not, however good the outcome. So close on what should have happened. Disclosure of both options and their risk, time, and a decision taken by her. So consent extracted through those she depends on is paternalism, wearing consent as costume. So then moving to 4b, that is efficiency and effectiveness. The paper hands you both definitions, so do not spend a word restating them. So the stem supplies both definition and asks only how you balance them to enhance productivity. So the shared category is performance. The variable that separates them is the object of judgment. Efficiency judges the ratio of output to input. Effectiveness judges whether that output was the right one to produce. Then comes to one example each. A department that clears files faster than any other is efficient. A department clearing the wrong files is effectively useless. And a scheme that reaches every intended beneficiary at high cost is effective and inefficient. Now, the balance the question asks for what? Effectiveness sets the target, efficiency delivers it. Sequence, not compromise. So, which gives you the failure mode to name, measure efficiency alone, and the system optimizes the measurable at the cost of the purpose. Then targets met, outcome missed. So you have to close on measuring both with outcome indicators alongside throughout. Effectiveness sets the target, but efficiency delivers it. Then sequence, not compromise. Then fifth, A, remote schools enforcement against rights, educational rights. Enforcement is right. The children's education is right. Enforcement is right. The children's education is right. Both. So strict enforcement of regulations would close most remote schools. Where the administrator balance? Where does the administrator balance? The move that separates the answer is the purpose test. Ask why the rules exist. School regulation exists to protect educational standards. If enforcing it closes almost every remote school, the rule has begun to defeat the purpose it was written to serve. So this is not permission to ignore rules. State it, state it in the administrative order, preserve the purpose of the rule, and design an accountable exception where strict general application produces substantive injustice. So concretely, classify deviations into those touching child safety, which are non-negotiable and immediate, and those touching infrastructure norms, which get a graded timeline with a support attached. So fix before you sanction. Closure as an last resort with alternative schooling arranged first. Everything documented and time bound. Then comes to Article 21A, gives you the constitutional anchor. Aristotle's equity gives you the name. The correction of law where law being general fails a particular case. So here, preserve the purpose of the rule. That is important. At the same time, design an accountable exception where it general form fails a particular case. Then fifth B, ethics subjugated to strategic interest in international relations. Ethics subjugated to strategic interest in international relations. So, in international relations, ethical considerations are often subordinated to the interests of states discussed. This is the actual question. So, do not write an idealist answer. So, concede the realist point first. There is no authority above states. So, ethical restraint is not enforced from outside and interest genuinely dominates. Then show where the claim overstates. Ethics in international relations is not absent, it is institutionalized. Treaties, humanitarian law, refugee protection, reciprocity, and reputation as a hard currency in a repeated game. So states that break commitments pay in future bargaining power. And the strongest form here is what? Over a long enough horizon, ethical conduct and strategic interest converge more often than they diverge. Converge more often than they diverge. Because credibility is an asset here. Then the limit what? They do not always converge, and pretending otherwise is the second way this answer fails. So name a case where they do not. So state what you would do and close on India's stated position rather than a general sermon. So here what? Over a long horizon, credibility is an asset, that is, but name where interest and ethics do not converge. The sixth A, the DM, the PS daughter empathy against rules. The DM stops a teacher's transfer at his personal assistant's request. The teacher tutors the PS daughter. So this is the question. Most candidates will answer the question the STEM advertises. The disability is a genuine hardship. Disability is a genuine hardship. Empathy requires recognizing it. Rules matter too, but balance, reasonable, and worth about 5. Read it again. The beneficiary is the officer's own personal assistant's daughter. Now ask the question that decides it. If another child in the district has exactly the same hardship and no access to the district magistrate, what happens to the child? That is conflict of interest, and it is not a precedent problem. The same act for a stronger child is a different act. So the strong answer does not say be empathetic but careful. It says to not personalize the exception. Check whether transfer policy already contains compassionate retention or not. Apply objective hardship criteria. Route it through the mechanism rather than the office, and make it reachable by every identical case, not only the one that walked in. Then empathy, impartiality, rules, and institutional fairness is in our 4 sentences. That is a 7 next to a 5. So do not personalize the exception. Make it reachable by every identical case. So here the trap is what? Answering the conflict. The STEM advertises. Empathy versus rules is reasonable. Everyone will write it, and it is worth about 5 only. So then move what? The beneficiary is officer's own PS daughter. Then the conflict of interest president is not. This is conflict of interest, not a president problem. So ask what happens to the identical child with no access to DM. Then check policy of compassionate retention there, and objective hardship criteria, route through the mechanism. Then comes to 6B, duty against charity. Spending some resources to relieve serious Sufferings is a moral duty, not charity. Justify the claim. A distinguished question, run the frame. Genus. Both are other regarding action that transfers resources to someone worse off. Then differentia in one sentence. Charity is optional and its omission is not a wrong. Duty is owed and failing it is. So the claim you are asked to justify, and note the paper tells you which side to argue. So is that where you can prevent serious suffering at no comparable cost to yourself, the transfer is obligatory. So justify it by the comparable cost test. The moral weight of what you would lose is trivial against what they would. So comes to one example each. Funding a wing of a building that carries your name is charity. Not withholding a medicine you cannot use from someone who will die without it, it is duty. So then the fourth move, what, which nobody writes. What changes if you confuse them? If duty is treated as charity, the obligation becomes a favor and the recipient becomes a supplicant. So which is precisely how entitlements get administered as benevolence. So that is the administrative payoff, and it is what lifts this from a philosophy answer to a GS4 answer. So here what treat a as a duty, treat a duty as charity, and the entitled becomes a favor. The citizen is a supplicant. Here genus, differentia, and example. Justify with comparable cost test. So section B, 6 cases, 20 marks, 2 subparts each, more or less 125 words per part. Before the 6 what? The margin plan changes this year. 2 subpart means roughly 125 word match. Words each. Run the whole engine in your head. Role like stakeholders, collision, options, the legal, ethical, workable test, owned choice, plus systemic fix, and write only the two things asked. Then label A and B as visible headings. Write about protagonist, not about yourself. Then moving to the question number 7, Lata and Dr. Mansi, the hysterectomy. Question number A, part number A is here the ethical issues. The part number B is moral conduct of the doctor. The hardest case on the paper, because because everything about is it is nearly right. The intention was good, the clinical judgment was defensible. A second surgery genuinely carries risk and pain, the family agreed. So part A is ethical issues. Ethical issues what? Locate the wrong precisely, because that is what separates 11 from a 16. It is not that the uterus was removed, it is what a competent adult's consent was replaced by a relative's. For a decision that was not immediately life threatening, ask the question that decides it. Was there an emergency that made delay possible? That made delay impossible? If a biopsy and a later surgery remained clinically viable, permanent removal without her consent is a very hard to defend. A second surgery was an inconvenience and a risk. It was not death on the table. So then the rest, scope of consent, bodily integrity, surrogate consent, and who may lawful give it, the emergency doctrine and why it does not reach here, and the institutional failure that no consent protocol caught it. So these are all the ethical issues. And then part to be the moral conduct of the doctor. This is a verdict, not a decision. So deliver one. Good faith is established and mitigate culpability. It does not validate the act. An answer that concludes she acted in good faith and therefore acted rightly has collapsed intention into justification. So here what? Good intention does not validate a defective process. Good intention does not validate a defective process. So part B is a verdict. So we have to deliver one. The trap here is what? Concluding that she acted in good faith, therefore acted rightly. That collapses intention into justification. Then locate the wrong precisely. Then this way. Then comes to eighth question, that is Ravi, AI enabled predictive policing, ethical issues including bias. Question number A, part B, subpart B, that is alternatives that optimize compliance with ethics. So UPSC tells you about the system works. Public order has visibly improved. So the lazy anti-technology answer is unviable, and that is deliberately. Part A here, ethical issues including bias. Historical data encoding past discriminatory policing. So the model reproduce the enforcement pattern rather than the crime pattern. So a feedback loop here, petrol there, find more there, confirm the model, opacity, because residents cannot see or contest what is recorded against them, then presumption of innocence eroded by preventive detention on a score, then group level targeting of an identifiable community, and then sentence carries in the answer is what? Judge a system by the distribution of its errors, not by its average efficiency. This efficient overall and its failures land on the people least able to observe them. This is ethical issues. Then comes to part B, the alternatives, and note that wording here, the action that optimizes compliance with ethics, not ban, not continue, retain the capacity or retain the capability, audit the training data for disparate impact, mandate human review before any detention. So publish what categories are recorded, build a grievance and correction channel, cap surveillance intensity by proportionality, and review outcomes by neighborhood on a fixed cycle. So here what? Judge a system by the distribution of its errors, not by its average efficiency. So then move to question number 9, Seema, the corruption network. Read her description again. Honest, professionally efficient. So the paper is not asking whether she will take a bribe or not. The corruption already exists, touts subordinate officials, selective approvals, frightened employees, a backlog hurting the district, and the stem warns you that aggressive investigation produces institutional resistance. So the real question here is what? can be can an honest officer produce an honest institution? Personal integrity is a fact about Seema. Institutional integrity has to outlive her posting. So what are the ethical issues here? Part A, extortion of citizens for an entitlement, extortion extortion of citizens for an entitlement, capture of a public process by a private group, the honest employees deterred by fear, economic harm from the backlog, and the dilemma between disruption and continuity. Comes to part B, need both halves, immediate water, protect the evidence, isolate the actors, keep legitimate files moving so the public is not punished for the cleanup. Then quite fact finding before confrontation. Then comes to structural reforms, a chronological digital queue, and audit trail on every approval, rotation of sensitive posts, time bound disposal, applicant side tracking, random audit, and protection for the employees who were too frightened to act. So here what? Can an honest officer produce an honest institution? Integrity must outlive her posting. Question number 10th. Question number 10th, Vikas, biometric authentication in the PDS, options and balancing probity with empathy. This is for subpart A. Subpart B, the ethics of technology as gatekeeper. Two legitimate goals. Two legitimate goals. Two legitimate goals. Biometric verification exists to prevent leakages. but it fails for growing children, for manual laborers whose prints have worn, for senior citizens, and wherever connectivity fails, strict compliance protects the exchequer and stops the entitled. Unlimited discretion solves exclusion and invites leakages. Then part A, options and the balance. The first name what the requirement is for before you propose any exemption to it. Then you cannot argue for an exception to a rule you have not justified. Then design an exception that is auditable rather than discretionary. Alternative authentication, one time password, family member iris, an offline fallback with later reconciliation, a documented exception register, countersigned, time limited, randomly audited, distributor accountability metrics. Because exercise discretion compassionately is not an answer. It is a problem restated in nicer words. Article 21 is the anchor. A technology that denies food converts a subsistence entitlement into a conditional benefit. Then part B is what? The ethics of technology as a gatekeeper. And this one zooms out. Authentication is being used to prove identity, but exclusion is being read as ineligibility. A system that fails silently records not an error but an absence of entitlement. So the principle here is what? Where a technology stands between a citizen and a right, the burden of its failure must fall on the state, not on the citizen. This is most important thing. Designed for the failure case, not the average case. So here what? Where technology stands between a citizen and a right, the burden of its failure falls on the state, not citizen. Then moving to 11th one, that is Rajan. Ethnic conflict at Rajapuram. The ethical issues part A. Part B, the option protecting his non-partisan image. Two communities in violent conflict. Conflict land claims unequal resources. Inadequate political representation, separate relief camps. And the detail that decides the case. So the rivalry has already speeded into the administration and the police. Then part A, what the ethical issues? Impartiality of an administration that is no longer impartial, the duty to protect life before any political settlement. Relief parity relief parity between the camps as an ethical obligation, not a logistical one. Honesty about the external actor without inflaming it, and the legitimacy question underneath all of it. Then part B, what? And looking at the wording, the option that protects his non-partisan image, not conscience. The word is doing real work here. Neutrality, personal, procedural, perceived. Then personal neutrality is what? I do not favor either community, a fact about the officer. Then comes to procedural neutrality, relief, policing, arrests, a negotiation, follow one visible rule applied to both, a fact about the administration. Perceived neutrality is what? Both communities have reason to believe the process is fair, a fact about legitimacy. Here three neutralities: personal neutrality, then procedural neutrality, then perceived neutrality. The third is one that decides the case, an officer who is genuinely neutral but widely believed to be partisan cannot govern Rajapuram because in a conflict administration consent in the resource he is short of, which makes his answer concrete. So requisition a neutral third force rather than rely on compromised local police. Reopen the highway for food and medicine before anything political, because humanitarian action visible to both sides buys back standing. So mixed and jointly observed relief, publish what is being done, and a giant peace committee with representation from both communities, so the process is seen, not just conducted. So in a conflict administration, what consent is the resource, consent is the resource, the officer is shut off. Then moving to 12th one, that is Ajit, the arms sale. Part A, that is what? Options and which to select. Then B, what? balancing economic and strategic interest with ethics. This is not a narrative case, it is a dossier, and it should be answered like one. The part A, options and the choice. Do not write prose about arms trade in general. Set the criteria first, then apply them. End use and end user assurance, the risk of diversion or retransfer, treaty and not proliferation obligation, the human rights and conflict record of the buyer, regional stability and the domestic strategic and economic return. Then run both countries through the same criteria. Country A, sound technology base, planned R&D collaboration. Then defense need no alliance entanglement, but a long-term loan and therefore financial exposure. Then country B comes advance payment and a trade negotiation in play, but outside the NPT, non-proliferation treaty with nuclear weapons, support for guerrilla forces abroad, and a military budget eating into human development and a parallel negotiation with another supplier. Then choose A and say why in terms of the criteria rather than sentiment. The diversion and reputational risk in B is the one risk that cannot be mitigated by contract. So then say what the choice costs a smaller order deferred payment, and the argument that B will simply buy elsewhere. So what what if the transfer is wrong, someone else doing is does not make it right, and the sale would still be attributed to us. So this is the option A which to select, and then comes to part to B, balancing interest with ethics. Institutionalize it, a published end use certification regime, post shipment verification, an interministerial review with a standing veto on human rights grounds, and a documented refusal record. Ethics in arms exports is not a moral posture, it is a due diligence process, and processes can be audited. So here what the trap is, what general prose about ethics of the arms trade. This is not a narrative case, it is a what dossier. How to move? First set the criteria, then end use assurance, diversion risk, treaty and NPT obligations, the buyer's conflict record, regional stability, strategic return. Run both countries through a same list. So then choose a diversion and reputational risk. In B is the one risk, no contract mitigates. So then say what choice costs. So ethics in arms exports is not a posture, it is a due diligence process, and processes can be audited. So these are the questions we have discussed so far. This is the question 2026 paper GS4 questions, both section A and section B. So what our material taught and what matched. So coverage, what watched, what missed, what matched, number attached, etc. So effective coverage 78% overall, full credit hit, half credit partial, zero gap, a coverage figure, not a marks prediction. So now the part you can hold us to, and I will keep it short because this film is about the paper. We ran all 19 items against all 19 units, and the strategy film full credit where the answer was in built material, half where only of the demand was zero, where it is not there 78%, section A 73%, overall 78%, effective coverage. Section A 73%, section B 83%, GS3 72%, same audited. But more than this, what we are showing, we covered in all our marathon classes, and how to get 130 plus marks, 140 plus marks videos. So this is a coverage, not a marks prediction. So 78% of GS4 marks would be an extraordinary score. That is not what this measures. Then GS3 demanded that you name a system, name a system. A naming demand is binary. GS4 demanded what? A procedure run on unfamiliar content and procedure transfers. So this is the thing. So the four moves carried question 3 part C. We never taught Shakespeare. He appears nowhere in 3 units. So the distinguished frame carried question 6 part B. So strongest single match is unit 8 already contained question 10. In these words, what the one fingerprints we discussed. So matched what? Question 3C matched. Distinguished frame carried 6B, 3B, Aristotle 5, 10, 10. Few missed only. Question number 3. We over specified. Gandhi and Ambedkar Shakespeare came this time. And we also discussed about Gandhi and Ambedkar except Shakespeare. But we are here because Gandhi and Ambedkar also we discussed in trustee part. Ambedkar also we discussed. So, but few medical and consent ethics also we discussed, but it did not in detailed discussion. So, bets on proportional loss claim structure win. So, we code of ethics, constitutional morality, etc. And what UPSC thinks, what UPSC thinks, put the whole paper together and ask what the examiner is actually looking for. I think there are four things, and they explain every question we just see been through. We have just been through. The first one is both sides are legitimate. Decide and price it. Then somebody pays for the error. End on the system. So 19 items and the not villain except to question 9, where the corruption is a background rather than the dilemma. An answer what makes one side obviously right has not understood what was put in front of it. The examiner placed two real claims there on purpose, name them and concede both. So those are both sides are legitimate. The second one is decide and price it. Decide and say what the decision costs. Everybody writes the decision, almost nobody writes the price. I will do this accepting that the other is a real loss. And here is now I will mitigate is worth several marks more than I will do this because it is ethical. So third one is what somebody pays for every error and UPSC wants to know whether you know who. So it is the thread running through question 1 part A, question 8 and question 10, 50 marks of technology, and each case the machine is efficient on average while its failures concentrate on the people least able to contest them. In 2024, the AI case was about a company's emissions. What was machine cost? In 2026, it is about what the machine is permitted to decide. So somebody pays for the error. And the fourth one, end on the system, not on yourself. AI fairness cannot depend on Ravi being a good SP. Corruption control cannot depend on Seema being honest. PDS inclusion cannot depend on compassionate leader dealer. Communal neutrality cannot depend on Rajan's character. So the closing move of a strong answer is not what a good officer would be. This is the argument under which a worse officer would still have done the right thing. So what is the shift of the paper completes? Underneath all of four, the shift has paper completes. Go back to what did not come. Emotional intelligence, attitude, the list 5 values questions. Last asked in 2021. Integrity, perseverance, spirit of service, courage of conviction. The vocabulary of 2013. So those questions asked what kind of person you are. This paper asked whose right is at stake and what you owe them. Article 21, human rights, educational rights, bodily autonomy, consent. So the examiner has stopped asking you to describe a good person and started asking you to behave like a public decision maker. That is the whole paper in one sentence. and it is why the definitions went first. So this is the shift. This is the shift happened. Then moving to how to prepare for 2027. Six changes. The first one is stop preparing values in isolation, like not empathy, meaning importance examples, but empathy against rules, empathy against impartiality, empathy against fiscal responsibility. Every value taught as collision with the value it usually fights. So value as collisions you have to prepare rather than isolately, like individually values. Then second one is what every concept gets three parts, and the third is the nobody one nobody does, like meaning, application, and limitation. A quotation answer without a limit is an appreciation. A value without limit is a slogan, simply. Then third one is what? Domain blocks. Build domain blocks because the paper has stopped being general. Medical and consent ethics, informed consent and its elements, capacity, surrogate consent, the emergency doctrine, autonomy and beneficence, and non-maleficence, and justice as four named principles. Research on vulnerable populations. 40 marks sat there this year only. Consent, domain blocks, medical and consent, ethics, the technology, security, welfare delivery, and international ethics. The fourth one is what? Learn the constitutional vocabulary. Learn the constitutional vocabulary. Dignity, due process, proportionality, non-arbitrariness, reasonable classification. Article 21. This paper is being marked in that language now, and most candidates are still writing in the language of virtue. Then fifth one is what? For thinkers. One doctrine card each, not the summary one. We taught Ambedkar's constitutional morality, which is what 2025 quoted. The paper moved to his warning about civil disobedience. Same speech, different line. So no two or three specific propositions per thinker with an administrative application attached to each, and stop collecting names. So sixth one what? Rehearse the case in its 2026 shape. Two subparts, 125 words each, third person, and the engine run in the margin rather than on the page, and practice the 150 word case study because section A now contains five of them. Nobody drills the format. And one thing not to do not go looking for another list of thinkers. There is no thinker you can add next week worth as much as one more rehearsals of the four moves. So everything in one line, like values collision, meaning, application, limit, building blocks, domain blocks, constitutional vocabulary, one doctrine card per thinker, rehearse the 2026 shape. So name the collision, name the collision, decide, say what it costs, build the system so the next officer does not have to. So GS for 2026 tested conflicts, not definitions here. So GS for 2026 tested conflicts, not definitions. So name the collision, decide under the own decision, say what it costs, because every real choice costs something, and end on the system rather than on yourself, because the marks is not for being a good person. We cover more or less in our marathon 78% to 80%. We discussed all of the things regarding Ambedkar, regarding Gandhi, in Thinker's part, international ethics, etc. etc. In sections also archetypes, seven archetypes. So it is for leaving the next officer for a battle rule, better rule than you inherited. So this is the full written analysis with all 19 questions mapped and every claim sourced and is linked below. Thank you.